This section of OJS, we are discussing very important related questions of object literal. The main question is what is an object literal, and there will be 5 relative questions. There are many ways to create an object in JavaScript. There is also a class object, capital O, which can allow you to create an object. Here we are discussing the most essential way of object creation, and trust me, it's extremely important. In any case of object creation, the basic idea is that we are creating a container to bundle data pieces. Let's take a simple example. If we have a table on which we have pen, pencils, sharpeners, erasers, and 20 other things. Now, if you want to take all the things from one place to another, it's better that you have a box or a kind of container, so you put everything in it and shift it wherever you want to. Similarly, when you have different data pieces which you may want to pass to one function to another, or maybe you want to pass it to some server, then you bundle the data pieces in an object and pass it. So in a way, object actually allows you to create a container where you can put variables, even functions also. Let's take an example. You have product code, product name, price, and more fields, and you want to pass this data to a function. So the function might look like this, that you have function product and you have various parameters passed here. Instead of this, you can write something like this, that you have the object, put all the different pieces in one container. This becomes a container. We will see the syntax how we create it, but this is just a kind of illustration that how do we create an object and we pass the object in the function like this. So this is the whole idea of creating an object. Though there are many other advantages after creating this kind of container, but that discussion we keep it for some other day. At the moment, we are discussing all the relative questions and what is object literal. That is our main discussion. Object literal is simply a key value pair data structure. Let's take an example. I want to create an object literal. Normally, you may have different variables, for example, product code, product name, and so on. If I want to put everything inside object literal, how can I do that? To create the object literal, this is the syntax. If I say let or const obj is equal to curly brackets. If I do this, this means I have created an object literal. For example, I want to add variables to this object. Now remember, if I have product code is equal to 1001 for example, and I want to add this to the object, you just say obj.product code. Also, I want to add one more variable to it. I will say Apple, for example. In case if you want to add a function to the object, that's also possible. Let's say I want to have get data. That is the function. And this function, I want that it should be part of the object, not as an independent function. So I can say object dot get data is equal to, you don't need to write this name. This is basically function expression. And here I can simply say console.log object.pcode and object.pname. That's it. Let's try to display the value of obj itself. I'll say node ojs.js. Now as you can see here, the object displays that it has two variables and one method. When I'm saying 3, what does it have? It has 3 members. The variable you put inside object is called as a property. So we have 2 properties, pcode and pname, and a function added to an object is called as method. So here we have total 3 members, 2 properties and 1 method. This is how an object literal is created. So now if you have to pass this object to some function, maybe on the server, the thing is you have created this container and you have placed these members in it. That is the advantage of creating an object literal. This is not actually the right way. Normally we do not create object literal like this. what we do in JavaScript, the common practice I mean, is that we place everything inside the object literal directly. We don't create an empty object and then we add it generally. But the syntax changes a bit if you put everything inside the object. So we do not need to write obj dot, because as such you are declaring those members inside the object itself. You do not write equal to sign to assign it. You use the colon sign, and you do not end the statement with a semicolon. That is, you put a comma. This is the most commonly used way to create an object literal. We declare all the members inside the object itself. So now if I run, there is no change at all. It is the same thing. The only difference is now the code is shifted. That is, the declaration of properties and methods, or one method in our case, is shifted inside the obj, that is the object. If you want to access individual members, as you must have observed in this code, that dot is the operator, right? Now I also want to add one more point here, which is introduced in ES6. The function, that is the method we have written here, is like this. That is, we have an equal to sign, that is assignment, in this case colon, but that is a kind of assignment only. So we say get data equals to function. In ES6, now you can avoid this syntax. You can simply write like this. This is a valid one. So now instead of writing any colon or equal to outside the object, you just write get data. That's it. This is how we define the methods in classes also, but that we are going to discuss in one of our forthcoming section. So let's try this code again to make sure that the output is same. As long as calling this method is concerned, we can simply say object.getData. That's it. And this will display us the data. There it is. The way we have created one object literal, we can also have n level of objects in it. For example, you want one more object after p code. Let's say you want here that p code also has maybe some ID, and it also has second part, for example, the second part of the product code, maybe some character. So I just say ABC. So the thing is, whenever you want to create an object literal, you just open the curly brackets and you start writing. Important point here is that p code is the key and the one which you are writing here is the value. P name is the key, the one which you are writing here, like in this case apple, is the value. So that's why we call object literal is key value pair data structure. If you know about JSON format, that's also key value pair. But the only difference is that the key is always inside double quotes when we talk about JSON. But we are not discussing JSON at the moment, but just for the reference that if you are comparing this object with JSON, or rather JSON is more used because of this format we have in JavaScript called object literal, right? So this is the object which helps to convert the JSON data to this format. So often we see that the JSON data which we receive is converted into object literal. Now I'm changing back this product code to 1001. I also mentioned one thing here, that ES6 has this format where we directly write get data. We don't write any colon, sign or function. We do not write arrow function for sure, remember. That also we are going to discuss in one of the question, why we should not use arrow function inside object literal. To be on a safer side, if you are using this object, then I do not recommend the arrow function in it. But that we will discuss in one of our next questions. Here in ES6, there is also one more facility provided, and that is about giving the dynamic key values. Imagine that this p code or p name, for example, is not decided earlier. Maybe some data is retrieved and then that key is decided. So this key I want to make dynamic. Now let's say I create a variable here. I say let temporary variable is equal to, I name p code here, right? And if I say TV here, that is temporary variable, right? Let's see what happens. If I run this, it says undefined. So there is some problem with it, right? Object.p code is undefined. So there is some issue. Let me also display, instead of get data, let me just display the object itself. So you get better idea what exactly has happened. You see this TV 1001, but there is TV itself. It is not p code, and that's why, because we do not have any p code like variable, it is not giving the data. Instead it returns undefined. how can you make sure that this value of variable TV is assigned? What you have to do is you just put the key inside square brackets. The moment you put it in square bracket, object literal understands that this is a dynamic key. That means you are not supposed to take TV as a key. Rather, the value which is residing inside TV will be the actual key name. Let's try this again now. Now you see, instead of TV, now we have P code and 1001 is displayed. So this is something which is introduced in ES6. In fact, you may have different method like this. For example, I'll say get, then I join it and data. This is also valid. I'm just giving for the sake of showing the functionality. This can be a dynamic value, right? But right now, assume that we have two different values and you want to join. You may have two different variables which you may want to join for a method name or for a property name. Let's try this, whether it runs proper or not. You see this, it does say get data. So giving the dynamic key is possible because now we have the square bracket syntax to do this. There is also one more good facility available in ES6 which is called as property value shorthand, but that is one of our relative question. I'm going to discuss property shorthand feature in the relative question. So these were few syntax and tweaks we have seen about object literal. Now let's discuss relative questions of this topic. The first question is, can you have dynamic keys with object literal? Yes, we can have. We have already seen the last example where the key is not fixed but it is referred by a variable. Even we saw that a method like get data, we tried to divide into two different values, then also it was valid. So of course dynamic keys is absolutely allowed with square brackets. The next question is, how can you add read-only properties to an object? Now this is a very challenging question. The reason is we are using object, that is capital O object. Let's try a sample code for the same thing. I'm creating, let's say, a prototype. I'll say proto PR, or let's say proto itself, right? And I'll say object dot. There is a method called define property, not properties, property, where I have to pass an object literal if I have any object literal defined there. Otherwise I can pass an empty object literal. Let's say I want to define a property named prop, and then I can define the configuration. That is, you see here it says attributes. Attributes means properties or attributes of the property which we are defining right now. For example, let me try P code itself. P code. Now what I want about this property is that, is it writable? Yes, it is writable. That means one can change the property, right? Is it configurable? Yes, it is configurable. So I'll say true. What is the value of this property? I'll say 2001. Now I'm going to create an object saying const obj is equal to object dot create. I'm creating the object and I'm passing the property. This is one property configuration. Proto contains the configuration of one key. That is one property. This is the key name and this is the value. But there are other settings also you can specify. Now object.create, I say proto. That means it's going to create an object with this configured property. Now I'll say console log, and before that let me also try to assign, that is to change value P code to something else. Let's say I give 3001. That's it. So now the P code which we initialize with 2001, after creation we are changing it to 3001, and let me just refer the P code only. Let's see what happens. It says 3001. The value is changed. Now this writable, if I make it false like this, and then if I run, even though I assigned 3001, but it did not change. It remained 2001 because I mentioned that make it read only. So this is how you define the attributes of property, and you can manipulate with the object literal properties. Remember, if you are running this in the browser, it will give you error provided you are running it in a strict mode. But if you are not running in a strict mode, at least it will not change the value. Fine, it won't give any error. Like right now here, it is not showing any error. But if you have strict mode on, then certainly it will give error as well. So in short, yes, you can define read-only properties with define property method, which has several settings. Next question is, what is property value shorthand with object literal? Now this topic I just mentioned few minutes back, that this is a new feature introduced in ES6. Let me show you one example here. Again, I take product code 1001 and product name, which I give something like apple, my favorite. I'm talking about the fruit, not the electronic item. I'll say let obj is equal to, now see this, imagine that this object has product code and there you want to assign this value, that is p code, that is 1001. The point here is you want the value to be fetched from a variable. So you may write like this, p code is equal to p code. So the key is p code and the value is being fetched from this p code. Instead of this, ES6 gives you property value shorthand, that is p code. That's it. You do not need to write this colon. Just say p code. It means p code equals to p code. And I say p name is equal to p name. That means I don't write anything else. That's it. Let's check what is the object now. You see, the key is p code, value is 1001, which is being fetched from the variable. Similarly, we have p name and apple. So this is called as property value shorthand, where you do not need to write. You have both the left and right side values equal, then you simply go with p code and p name here. The next question is, what will be the output of this code? The output of this code, let's try the code here. The code says that there is an object we are creating and we are assigning this object, that is obj, to obj1. So when you are assigning the object, what actually happens is that the reference of the object is passed. So if you try to change obj1.a, then it does change the value of object 1, that is object itself. Why? Because here this will not create a new copy. This is not going to create a clone. It just creates the reference. So let's try this code. You see, so though obj.a was first, the output is second, even though you change obj1.a. So what actually happens in this case is that when you assign obj1 equals to obj, because the assignment is by reference, there is, you can imagine that a is separately located somewhere and both obj and obj1 are sharing the same location because they are referring the address of a and not the value. So whenever you say obj.a or obj1.a, it's going to refer the very same location or variable. That's why, because of the reference copy, it is giving this output. In case if you want to have different objects, then this isn't the way to create a clone. This is not creating clone in short. So if you want to create a clone, then that is our next question, which I'm going to discuss right now. So the next question is, how can we create a clone or a separate copy of an object literal? So let's take this example and I want to create a clone. One way is that you loop through all the properties, that is all the keys of object, and you assign to obj1, right? That is one way. But in ES6, we do also have object.assign method that will allow you to create the clone of one object literal. Let me change this code and we will try it. Instead of this, I will say object.assign. So the target object, you can write the object itself here. We are leaving it blank because this is also going to return the reference to, not exactly the reference, but the new copy to obj1. I want the copy of obj. Alright, now let's check the code. What happens? You see, now it says first.